Welcome back. Let's jump into building and blending. Here I'm taking my flathead brush and stippling in some of that highlight green. Then I will follow up with the shadow. Here you can even play with your tones of green just so that there can be variation of the trees. I'm even stippling in some trees above the mountain line just so that it can appear more natural. Pay attention to your light source where the light is shining through the valley, so the light will be hitting the trees from the left and more of the shadows will sit towards the right for this particular mountain. And even as we approach the top of the mountain, the shadows will start lying towards the bottom and the highlights will be placed on top since the light source is coming from the top. Here I'm adding some medium yellow to my highlight green to even lift those trees more. Here I'm starting to wet brush some shadows into the rocks so that we can start blending in depth and building dimension. Here I'm just going in with some highlights of the tan and applying it to some of the rocks that I see popping out from the mountain. Now I'm going to move on to the next mountain in front of the previous one and start adding more vibrant colors of green. I'm using the side of my brush to stipple in long, tall trees that appear to stand up high. I just packed my brush with some black and highlight green just to go in there and give the tree some more texture with shadows and highlights, so it just plays with your eye to give you the illusion of the branches and leaves that reflect off of the trees. Here I am dry brushing that tan, which is imitating the gravel that runs down the mountain. So as you see, I always work from the background first, then building my way up to the foreground. When creating space and depth for a landscape, you want to start with the furthest thing you see, which would be the background, and then working your way up to the closest thing you see, so slowly but surely adding details towards the foreground. Even this process requires its own set of layers and overlapping. So no matter what the layout is, once the color blocking is laid, I love to work in segments and focus in on the details before I move forward to the next segment. Here I'm going back in to add even smaller little dots so that those leaves that are shining from the sun can peek through. Here I'm just adding some more highlights to the gravel before I move on to the next set of trees that's going to overlap that layer. For the trees, you will be doing a lot of stippling. So my brush is not wet with water, but it is packed with paint. This creates thick hints of raised paint that lies on top of the canvas, which further complements the texture of the trees. So here we're starting to get closer to the foreground, so I will be adding my second layer of shadows right before we apply the details to the leaves. So here you can see I'm starting to get a bit more defined with the pattern of the leaves. I do a lot of jumping back and forth within my segment so that I can allow certain layers to dry so that my next set of shadows and highlights don't blend and get completely lost in the previous layer. Here I'm just going back and adding some darker hues of my shadow color and applying it to the trees so that they can appear individualized and set apart from one another. Next, we're going to move on to applying the lake to the bottom half of the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and rip off my masking tape and start mixing the colors for the lake itself. So from my reference picture, it appears to be this beautiful deep turquoise color. So I'm taking my medium yellow and my sky blue and mixing it together to create this amazing tone. I'm taking a medium flathead brush. I'm going to release some of that excess water, pack it with that turquoise color, and start dry brushing it onto the canvas. Here I'm starting to apply some white towards the middle of the lake. This will reflect the light waves that are traveling through the valley and the clouds that are hovering above. I'm starting to incorporate some deep hues of blue towards the corner of the lake. And this is by taking my sky blue and mixing it with a shadow color to go deeper in hue. Here I'm going in with a smaller flathead brush to really define that horizon line. Now that we have the first layer of the lake laid out, I'm going to show you how I mix my sand and gravel color. Here I'm experimenting with the paint, trying to achieve the colors I see. So I've mixed in all the primary colors and added white to achieve this tannish brown color. Here I'm taking that same medium flathead brush and dry brushing in that tan. Even applying some to the little island over there in that corner. Now I'm going to cross blend these two colors by wet brushing in the tan and the turquoise. This will imitate the shallow part of the lake where you can still see the ground through the water. Here I'm just lifting it a bit by applying some more white to the mix. So even that tan will be your base color, and lifting it with the value of white would be considered the highlight. Here I'm going in by dry brushing some of that base tan, and then I will follow up with adding white to the mixture and applying it towards the edge of the shore. So I'm going to allow this layer to dry a bit and jump back to adding details to the lake. I'm going to go in with a set of flathead brushes and a small round brush for detail. First, I'm going to go in with a flathead brush and wet brush in some more white paint. Next, I'm going to imitate the ripples and focus on creating the patterns that I see. The trick to this technique is to skip every other brush stroke. I'm still lightly wet brushing in this process. Here I'm going back to add my second layer of deep blues. This will start to portray the deepness of the lake. So now I'm jumping back to my ripples and starting to really define them with my small pointer brush. Here I'm going in with my small flathead brush to really get those details of the ripples and even connecting some of the ripples together. I'm still wet brushing this process by lightly grazing the canvas. Next, I'm going to wet brush in some turquoise and tan patterns. Here I'm bouncing back to the ripples and adding some pure white paint to the highlights. Pay attention to your reference picture and try to imitate the natural flow and waves of the water. As you continue to layer these ripples, go in and add some cute little sparkles to the water so that it can really reflect where the light is hitting it. Next, I'm going to wet brush in some shadows. I've mixed this color by just adding a tad of black to my turquoise. I'm following the same pattern as I would if I was applying the highlights, but just make sure that your shadows are under the highlight itself. This faint shadow is being cast from the mountain in the background. We are now approaching our finalizing stage, so see you in the next video.